Welcome to the Three Circles Living podcast, where you can learn how to improve your life, no matter if you want to accelerate your professional career, have better relationships, be healthier, find fulfillment in your life. This is a podcast for you. And again, make sure to share it and leave a comment with the nugget that you found most valuable. Today, we're picking up back from our last episode about mental health. And topic that we're really diving into is being centered, strong, and unshakable, and how to build mental health that carries you through anything. So we started last week with really understanding that so many of us, like 85%, probably more than that, are really not confident, have not a good self-image. And we talked about how we constantly compare ourselves. I'm definitely queen of that, that's for sure. And how that affects your mental health and everything else in your life, really, what you're doing. So we want to dive back into that because it's such an important topic and really talk about how to center yourself and how to be strong and really get unshakable because there's always going to be something that is going on. Life happens. We cannot avoid that. But how can you be strong and move through it as smooth as possible? So that's today. And go ahead.
I was just going to say, that sounds good. I can't wait to hear
Well, you have to support me here because I want to hear all about it since you're definitely helped me. And I want to say one of the biggest things, and that's now been like 6 years because I've struggled with low self-confidence, self-esteem, self-image. Like literally, I looked in the mirror and I didn't like what I saw. Like I didn't like the outside and I didn't like the inside. And it was a really hard to overcome that and feel confident and going into a room like I was always looking where is the spot where there's no light, where nobody can see me so I can just observe. Like I don't want to be in the middle of it. And because I wasn't confident, I didn't know how to present myself, right? And I remember the one of the first things, actually an exercise that you did with me was you asked me like, what are your values and principles? And that was one of the things where like, I don't know. I do not know what that even is and why is that important? Why are you asking me this? I want to work on confidence, not on my values and principles. What does that have to do with anything? But it was a foundation for me. And that's one of the things that I now tell everybody else to do.
well,
But
it is a foundation, right? And this actually will serve the audience in every corner of their life. I mean, we're going to bring it back to centering in a minute. But if you're not clear on what your values are and on what your principles are, and I would add your beliefs, which is a whole
mm,
can of worms, that those any of those any disconnect in how you're actually going through life, what you're either allowing into your life or the choices you're making in your life that conflict with those three things is going to cause you significant underlying stress. You could call it cognitive dissonance. It's going to cause you stress. That's the bottom line. And actually even worse, that because that takes reflection and it takes
mhm,
work. And we live in a world today where it's easy to avoid any quiet moment. It's so easy. You can just sit on your phone and play words with friends or watch TikTok videos or do whatever you want so that you don't have to confront yourself. And which is a horrible thing. You want to spend time with yourself, reflecting and clarifying and understanding and learning. And I mean, it's critical because you are everywhere you are. I mean, that's the bottom line. And so you have people who choose career paths, they make big life choices, and they haven't considered these underlying factors. They have no idea what that's actually going to feel like. Even if some people are highly successful in a venture and they're massively miserable because they didn't consider these things when they pursued it. They bulled their way to success, because you can bull your way to success in anything by just doing whatever the process of the work is for that thing, and being unyielding and not quitting, and you can succeed in anything. That's what successful people in a specific area have in common, is that they don't quit, right? It doesn't mean it ends up being the right thing for you to do. And so you can't even decide what your priorities are. In other words, I create this little pyramid. I call it the pyramid of pursuits, which is something that you learned a long time ago. And the bottom of that pyramid is your principles, your values, and your beliefs, right? And then that's what drives your priorities. You can't even decide what a priority is unless you know those underlying things. And then those priorities are what should drive goals or purpose or vision or all those kinds of things, which then drive your actions and drive your plans and drive what you do in your life. But most people don't think about that because they don't know to think about it, or they're too busy just being in the busyness of life, which a lot of it is self-initiated, because these technology tools we have access to actually allow us to be less busy and more productive. But that's not how people are handling them. They're quite the opposite. They're burning time like it's just like they're lighting a match to their time because they can. You can distract yourself so readily. So it's really important to talk about these, because that drives decision making and it drives goal setting, and it really leads to building the life that you truly want, which will evolve as you go. And I remind me for us to come back to the principles in a moment, but because when you talk about being centered, there's two parts to being centered, really. And in the book, I really only talk about centering from a principles perspective. But there's also the centering you need to do daily. You need to get yourself to some sort of even, because no matter what you do in your life, you are not going to wake up the same way you went to bed. That's not how it works. You can have the greatest day ever and feel unbelievable and feel so dialed in, and you can go to bed and wake up and you're like, what the hell is this, right? You wake up and then there's this whole new world that you can't even understand why you feel this way today when you felt like this way yesterday. And what changed? Nothing. You went to sleep. That's what changed. And that's the way it is, right? You don't get to choose how you wake up. You wake up, and depending on what your wiring is, right? So I talk very openly about my wiring. My chemical wiring it's not favorable. I don't get the joy. I didn't get the joy gene. I had to work for the joy gene. And so most mornings when I wake up, if it weren't for my habits and what I've been doing for 30 plus years, it would be a struggle to get out of bed. I don't allow it to be an option, and I choose gratitude, and I get up in the morning, and as soon as I wake up, I'm like, boom, I'm out. I get the day. But it doesn't mean I feel that way. It means I choose that path. And so you want to get centered, because one of the biggest trust breakers in life is inconsistency in how you show up. If someone can't trust how you're going to show up every day, then they're not going to trust you in anything. You can't lead anything when you have inconsistent behavior, because, well, you can only lead to the degree you have power or authority. You will never lead based on people desiring to follow you, because they can't trust you, and trust is at the center of that. And so you have to center yourself every day so you're showing up the right way, because the most viral thing in the world is not COVID, it's an attitude. You can walk into a room and poison it without even getting anywhere near someone, right? That's just a fact. And then it affects everybody. When someone like walks in with bad energy in a room, you're like, "Ooh, what happened?" The whole room is affected. And so basic centering is a morning routine, right? That's a way to get yourself to an even keel, and for me, that is gratitude, reflection, journaling, exercise, reading, right? All those things are every morning to get me centered for the day. That's different from the centering that we're actually talking about. That's just showing up every day. Getting centered in your principles is an entirely different thing. That's a sort of like a behavioral guideline, is what that ends up being.
You said so many great things. Like I'm noting everything down. I want to come back real quick to the quiet moment because I just had that conversation with someone that, especially when you're a parent or when you have a lot of things going on in your life, the only time when I'm not occupied is when everybody else is in bed and I can finally not like do what I want or listen to something that I want or and then most of the time I choose something like you said, I want to get distracted. I don't want to have to think about, okay, what else do I have to do? Because I do that all day, every day, and make decisions on so many different levels. But then it's easy to get to procrastinate, not just to be distracted, but procrastinate the things that you want to work on as well. So I've seen that a few years ago. I love the fact that take yourself on a date. I do that once in a while. And then also with the same thing with the principles and the values, if you don't have the quiet time and if you don't take the time for yourself and with yourself, be honest with yourself, it sucks. It sucked for me at first because I needed to be really honest and I understood that I gave into things and followed other people's ideas of success or what they thought um, was the right thing to do, which didn't align with who I was or, the things I wanted to do. And I had to get really honest and say, no, I have to say no to that. And that brings up a whole other conversation of now you have to actually say no to someone and have a conversation about it and maybe even a confrontation that comes out of that. Um,
Maybe, maybe,
maybe, yes.
maybe. I mean, the reality is no is a complete sentence,
Yes.
right? So you can say no and you truly don't owe somebody your reasoning. Now, I'm the kind of person who is going to massage a no most of the time, unless it's an easy one, right? I'm going to I'll give them a reason because I don't want them to feel like I'm rejecting them. I'm conscious of my impact on other people when I say no. But having your values and principles in line, and not to mention, this is a whole other subset, being very purposeful in the way you use your time and structuring your time and having your own plan. Or just the bottom line is if you don't have a plan, someone will have one for you. That's the nature of life. Or because you're always going to be part of somebody else's plan. And so when you are purposeful with your time and you are allocating to things that matter, and because of your prioritizing and you're planning your time, it's very easy to say no. You can say, I would love to, but no. Because I'm already completely booked or filled up, or there's no space right now for that, or you know what I mean? You'll have
Yeah.
if you need to give, if you feel because of the relationship that you want to that you want to give them something as opposed to just a no. But the reality is, for the most part, you don't owe anybody an explanation. It should be mutual respect, right?
Yeah.
I respect that.
Is that, and for anyone that is listening and can relate to this, that I don't, since I make a lot of decisions already with my job and also with being a parent, I don't want to make any more decisions if I don't have to. I'm just fatigued with that. Like somebody else make the decision. Where do we go to dinner or what do we have for dinner? I don't care. Like just tell me. Um, the thing is though, when you know these things and when you're more centered in all of the values, the principles, everything like that, your decision making becomes easier because it's simplified. You know exactly what you want, and then you know it's a yes or it's a no. So you don't have to think about it and constantly evaluate, okay, is it that? Do I feel like it? Do I want to do it? Like you just know. And that makes it so much easier. And that also all of the things that you said, it helps you prioritize, it frees up your time, it frees up your energy and your stress level. You're not stressed anymore as much. All of the things.
Yeah, 100%. So just to give something, it's important to figure out your values. And you have everybody who's listening has many. You have many, but it's important to clarify. Some of them are values in the way you operate with people, and some of those are values that are specific to what's most important to you in the kind of the bigger areas of your life. And there are lots of places, and I would encourage you to go find an entire list of values and they're sort of like what you stand for, what that's sort of what values are, right? That they're things you won't deviate from, and identify maybe your top 10. Like for me, like freedom is a major value of mine, and peace is a major value of my family, health, serving others, integrity of commitment. Those are important values of mine. And so if someone, when you've had a modicum of progress in life, the more credible you become, the more opportunities come your way. Well, you can't do them all, first of all. And second of all, often people will jump at an opportunity because there's more money in it.
Mm.
And then they'll find once they're in the mix, the money wasn't really worth it because they'll discover there's something that's violating, but they don't know because it didn't clarify values. And I'll share this little nugget. There was a period many years ago when I basically took 6 years off of purposeful activity because I had built something that had a substantial amount of passive income, and money is not in my top 10 values. It's not there. And I wanted to be more present with my children and explore some other things. And in that period of time, I received no less than a half a dozen offers that were 5 times the money I was earning, 5 times. And I said no without a second of consideration to every single one of them because they weren't in line with my values. And also, there's other values I didn't mention that they would have violated. And so values are part of the guardrails for how you operate in life. And it's important for you to stay in the lane that's ideal for you. And you have to identify that lane. And then principles are sort of like your behavioral guidelines in how you operate. And so first, and in the book, I talk about getting principle centered, right? The power of being principle centered is that principles don't have emotion, right? They are not subject to emotion. They are simply rules of behavior. That's probably a simple way to put them. And so you don't sway from that. Like I list several of mine in the book, but to offset that, and I'm not going to go down this rabbit hole, but either read the book or read Stephen Covey from years ago, or he talks about being principle centered, and he talks about how people are centered. Some people are money centered. Some people are spouse centered. Some people are material centered. They're centered on all these different kinds of things. And they don't recognize that those things dominate their decision making because they have an emotional attachment to pleasing the thing, right? And that dictates how they'll make a decision, which has actually nothing to do with real life. It's an emotional intelligent thing, right? It's not having the awareness to understand that they're being pulled in a direction because they're allowing something else to be their guideline instead of their own thing, so to speak. And to clarify your behavioral guidelines, your principles in that way. And again, I share several in the book, but a few that are powerful are understanding that everything has a process. Once you understand that everything has a process, fundamentally, it makes your life so easy. You don't fall prey to any magic stuff, right? Let's face it. If there was magic stuff in the world that would fix whatever is ailing someone overnight besides a pharmaceutical band-aid, which doesn't fix anything. It just allows you to not feel that thing. So it basically is numbing it.
Mhm.
But if there was a fix, a quick fix for anything, then everything that they talk about quick fixes for would no longer exist. But clearly, everything still exists in a worse way. Why? Because quick fixes end up digging deeper holes. That's what quick fixes do, right? So principles, they build foundations. And so everything has a, if you put these two together, everything has a process and never sacrifice the short term for the long term for a short term gain. If you just put those two things together, you could conquer anything that's a problem in your life. Everything. You just use those two simple principles, right? And so, you identify the principles that you recognize are in line with who you are and what matters to you, and then they become behavioral approaches to everything. And then you'd completely take the emotional impact. You can't take emotion out of it. You don't get to do that. That's not, you're a human being. You don't get the ability unless you're, a serial killer, right? I mean, there again, everything we talk about is in the bulk of the bell curve of life. There's always an outlier on each end of the curve, no matter what you're doing, right? That don't apply, right? But the majority of people, greater than the majority, fall into the bell curve. And so the majority of people are emotional creatures. There's no way around it. You can't, that's part of being human. That's part of what separates us. And you can't get away from emotions. So you have to know that they exist and you have to acknowledge them. And then you move forward in spite of them or in the face of them, right? As opposed to allowing emotion to dictate a decision, which is the worst way to make a decision, right? Because
Mhm.
that's not thought, right? It's going to go through your emotions first and then into your logical brain. And so emotional intelligence is having the awareness that you have these feelings, but that you are not these feelings. That's just a feeling, and that a feeling is a trigger for you to actually go, okay, why do I have that feeling? Not, okay, I need to do this because I feel this way. No, that's disaster waiting to happen. And so that's what principles do. They allow you to push the emotion aside and then operate on a very set of specific steps in any capacity. And that begins to actually augment growing you emotionally, growing you stronger, right? We already mentioned none of this matters if you won't take care of your health. It just doesn't matter. Just go do whatever you want because it's not going to matter. You're not going to live as long and you're not going to be as productive as long and you're not going to be what you could be in any part of your life. That's a fact. You get that piece, start to show yourself you're worth it. Now you know that you're worth it a little more. Now you have a set of ways to operate that allow you to just build and build and build and build in life. Was that too much, Chris?
No, that was perfect. And one of the things that I think will sum it up, well, you summed it up already. Like I actually could just stop here, but just because I think it's very important, and I've been in that I always found myself, why do I keep running into the same issues? Why do the same problems end up coming up? And why do I always make the same mistakes or make the wrong decisions? Well, it's because I wasn't centered. I didn't have values or principles or anything figured out. I didn't reflect. I didn't ask myself anything. I didn't learn from from my mistakes or from the decision that I made. And this will help you once you have it in place. Yes, it takes some time to like actually reflect on it and figure it out, but you're going to save a lot of time in the long run.
Yeah. Let's pick this up next time on the beliefs
Mhm.
piece because we should talk about that one a little. I mean,
Yeah,
we're talking about this foundation at the bottom of this pyramid. We should touch on beliefs the next time
for sure.
because that's a really big thing to unpack too, and it's super duper important.
It is. Awesome. So you have some homework. You need to work on a few things. But thank you for staying with us, listening, and hopefully it was impactful for you to you and you got something out of it, again, let us know in the comments. And if you want us to dive deeper into anything, please let us know. We're happy to do that.
Chris, thanks for all you're doing to make this happen.
Of course. Thanks, everyone.
See y'all next time.
Bye.